That Jadi is amazing if you uh, don't care for the sound of Boulder electronics, for one. Just very, very different styles, different cups of tea. No, I have never listened to the Jadi DAC. A very good friend of mine who wound up purchasing the MSB Select plus Digital Director did audition the Jadi DAC in a very nice system of Jadi electronics and Devore 096 loudspeakers. And he came back to me and said, you know, I could listen to that music all day long at that store. And I said, well, that's kind of the idea. So it just depends what you want. He has a much more contemporary, expensive, high-end system than Jadi DAC on 096s, but I'm sympathetic to the musicality of that system, the 096 system. So look, it's just what different people want. But no, I've never listened to their DAC. I've listened over the course of time to a variety of MSBs. I have a friend with the MSB Select 2. I have a friend with the MSB Reference. He used to have the Premier. I have listened to numerous Lampezzators of every model. I've listened to Ari Surratt DAC, the Infigo DAC, the Nagra HD DAC, the SW1X DAC, a bunch of things because my friend was allowed me to join his coattails for a DAC audition that consisted of probably a dozen DACs, not quite a dozen, 10 DACs. Have you ever heard their DAC? Legacy Arias. I'm not familiar with that one. Oh, okay, good. That was the What's Hot and What's Best DAC update, I think. Who else has joined us? Welcome. Thomas, hello. Good evening there. Where are you calling in from? Corey, good evening. Thank you for joining. Thomas, where are you located? And Corey, where are you located? Caesar, which DAC do you think sounds similar to the Lampezator? The Ari Surratt DAC sounded the most similar to the Lampezator, not surprisingly, both tube DACs, which doesn't necessarily mean they'll sound similar, but in this case, they kind of did. Oh, wonderful. Tink and I visited Georgia a couple of years ago. Oh, the Jadi DAC, yeah. I suspect the Jadi DAC might sound similar to the Lampezator, but I don't know. That would be actually a very interesting comparison. A really interesting comparison would be Jadi DAC versus a Lampezator versus an Ari Surratt versus an SW1X. All four tube DACs of different design philosophy. That sure would be interesting. Thomas, where are you joining us from? Hi, Joe. Joe is a good friend of mine on What's Best. Thanks so much for joining, Joe. Just waiting for a few more people, and we will start the program. Joe, do you have any experience with any of the tube DACs? Caesar was asking about tube DACs. And I said I have experience with Lampezator, very brief with the Aries Seurat and the SW1X. Yeah, long time no see, Joe, that's for sure. Joe from What's Best, who I know from What's Best, and I met in person for the first time in London in 2015. Joe, so do you have any particular experience with tube DACs of any kind? Ah, okay. So Caesar, Joe's heard the Lampazators. Corey, good. I had the same system for 18 years, and that system was Martin Logan Prodigy loudspeakers, VTL MB750s, VPI TNT Mark IV turntable, Graham 2.0 and then 2.2 tone arm, and Ben's Ruby 2. So most of my audiophile life was with the Ben's Ruby 2. I also like the later model, the Ben's LPSMR. I've heard a lot of cartridges over the years, Corey, and I view cartridges on a spectrum from something like let's say the Koetsu on one end to the Lyra Atlas on the other, or maybe Ortophon Anna Diamond on the other. And it's a matter of where you fall in terms of personal sonic preferences. I have tended to like the cartridges that are a little bit more on the less analytical, less clinical half of the cartridge spectrum. So I like things like Koetsu's, Ben's Micro, airtight cartridges. I like the airtight PC1 Supreme, the airtight Opus, Zix Universe Premium. I've tended to not personally care for the original Lyra Atlas. The Aetna SL seems to be a different thing to me and really was not similar to the typical Lyra house sound. So I put the Aetna SL in a separate category. And people say the Lambda is now in a separate category. But on that side, I would put the Goldfinger statement, the Lyras generally, the Ortophon Anna to me. So that's sort of how I would break down that spectrum. Now I have the Zix Universe Premium, which to me falls on the Opus 1, PC1 Supreme, Ben's Ruby, Ben's Micro kind of range, and also a Grado Epoch 3. Have I answered your question there? Very, very nice set of choices, Corey. MSL Signature Platinum, a friend of mine has that. He also has the Opus. I can tell you he loves the Opus, and he's kind of shelved the MS1, the MSL Signature Platinum. A bunch of people on What's Best have experience with the Azzurro Bordeaux. I personally do not, but I'll tell you on the Opus 1, there are very few components about which you never hear a sharp word. I have never heard somebody complain about the Opus 1. It might not be everybody's perfect cup of tea, but I think in general, people generally like the Opus 1. I think people treat it as a 9 in virtually every category, if it's not a 10 in some, maybe a 10 in many categories, but I would say the Opus 1 is my single favorite moving coil cartridge today. So my vote, Opus 1, I think you'll be happy for the rest of your life. What else can I help you with? You love your DS audio, yes. Caesar, how would you compare the DS audio to the Dynavector? I have a friend that has had a DS audio for a couple of years. I've listened to it in his very big system numerous times in direct comparison to, I believe, a Transfiguration Proteus and in direct comparison to a Dynavector. I have two other friends who have gone completely optical cartridge. So I have some significant experience listening to the optical cartridge. With three friends who have them in their systems, and two have converted. Actually, basically, all three of those consider themselves completely converted to optical cartridges. Which cartridge do you find to be more musical, whatever that means? I know it's a difficult thing to define, but we all say the term. The DS Audio or the Dynavector? If you're putting on some, whatever your most favorite type of music that achieves for you the greatest emotional connection, do you reach for the DS Audio or do you reach for the Dynavector? The DS Audio is absolutely quiet. And I should say, because I've written about this, I prefer even though the DS Audio is not my ultimate cup of tea, I prefer the DS Audio over roughly 2/3, maybe 3/4 of all conventional moving coil cartridges. So DS Audio all the way. Look, you are in very good company. I have three very experienced lifelong audiophile friends, and they love the DS Audio. I guess I'm personally not completely sold on it for myself. I love the quietness. I love the transparency. It gives you incredible detail and resolution and transparency without brightness and clinicalness that I personally hear from the Lyre Atlas, which is why I don't like that. And it's really hard to explain, and you love it, so you're not going to understand me, but there is still, for my ears, some smidgen of emotionalness or musicality that for me is absent from the DS Audio that I still get from something like a Grado Epoch 3 or the warmer side moving coils like a Koetsu or an Opus 1. So just personal preference. DS Audio is totally amazing. I totally get why people love it. I totally get why people have abandoned moving coils for it. I'm just not personally completely sold versus my favorite moving coils. I definitely prefer the DS Audio to most moving coils, but if I had it here, I'd still probably reach for the Grado Epoch 3 if I want to maximize my emotional engagement. Okay, we have 13 guests. I'm delighted you've all joined us. The program for tonight is What's Best Forum's inaugural live stream. And I'm going to be doing this on the iPhone because I want to give you guys and ladies a brief tour of the listening room. Are you ready? Okay, I'm going to pick this thing up and take it from outside. Whoop. Should we bias our system towards the type of music we like? Enjoy 80s recordings tend to be bright. I don't believe in steering a particular sound to the particular music we like in terms of brightness or sonic qualities. I mean, if all you listen to is terribly recorded mid-80s pop, there's nothing wrong with building a system that maximizes your personal enjoyment for listening to that particular kind of music. But to say that you want to steer the system to make sonically palatable, horrible, bright recordings, I want you to have a system that's a general purpose system. I don't want you to have a system that's a square plug that can only take a square hole that can only take square plugs. I want you to have a general purpose quality system. Of course, there's nothing wrong with gearing it to maybe using slightly warmer tube equipment or Conrad Johnson or a slightly warmer cartridge, if that's pretty much what you exclusively enjoy. But I don't really love the idea of conscientiously gearing the entire tonal balance of a system to a particular set of poor recordings. Amadeus, welcome. Joe, welcome. Scott, welcome. Brought me to Cardis Cables, and then this will be the last question. I promise I'll get back to all the other questions after we do the tour. I use transparent cables my whole life with the prior system consisting of Martin Logan Prodigies, VTL amplifiers, Aesthetics IO phonostage. And I've always been a little wary of what I think is kind of a consensus brighter cable, like the Nordost Valhalla kind of stuff. What drew me to the Cardis cables is nothing terribly scientific. I think the Cardis cables are very well made because that company literally extrudes its own copper. So I think you at least are getting a quality product for your money that's conscientiously well made. I started with short interconnects between the front end components and the phone on the line stage, compared them to Belden, and I think I preferred the Cardis Clear Beyond. And just recently, I replaced a 47-foot length of Belden 1192A with Cardis Clear Reflection. And so far, I'm enjoying that as well, better than the Cardis. So there's a lot more to say about Cardis in particular, and a lot more about my general cable philosophy in general, but I'd like to start the tour. Okay, so I'm gonna pick you guys up here. I'm going to take you to the front of the building, so to speak. Okay. This is the hallway to the listening room. Walk down here. What do we have to the right? To the left, sorry. To the left. We have a typical kitchen closet pantry mess, but we have a kind of embarrassingly elaborate electrical system for the listening room. So this crazy thing is a dedicated sub-panel for the listening room that is 100 amps fed off of 125, man. 100 amps fed off of a existing sub-panel. Now, if I was completely perfectionistic and had unlimited money, I would have run a new line from the transformer directly to this panel somehow, but I didn't do that. I didn't think of that. Tink and I were living in London at the time, and it was hard enough to arrange this, what I already did from a continent away. So this sub-panel is fed by an existing legacy sub-panel. I have approximately, I think I have 8 120 volt outlets and 3 240 volt outlets. So I think this thing's about 11, 12 circuits. Okay, kind of over the, and it's 2 separate chemical grounds. So I can connect chemical ground A or B or A plus B. Right now, A plus B is connected. And even though I'm using all this tube stuff and mixing single-ended and balanced, and I have JD amplifiers, which sure as hell are not the quietest things in the world, I seem to have very little noise trouble. So it seems to be working. Okay, so that's to the left of the listening room. Here we have the family portrait, wife Tinka, daughter Lola. Come up to Stevie Nicks here. Hello, Stevie. Enter the listening room. Close the door behind me. Rear left corner of the listening room. Over here is a kitchen. If I had had my wits about me, I would have not done this glass wall, which I thought looked nice. I would have blocked this up with a conventional drywall sidewall and saved myself a lot of headache and grief trying to deal with a glass wall in the rear left section of the listening room. Here we have left channel, Saraswati, who brings good music vibes. We'll get to her later. Right channel, main listening chair, couch for friends. Okay, so Griffin Pendragons. These things were first produced, I think, in 2013. I think they were produced until 2016. I think I ordered mine in 2016. They'd been in storage for 5 years. Thanks, I am ever grateful to Jason Lord of the Source AV and Torrents for storing these things for me for an incredibly frustrating 6 years when I told him it was going to be 6 months. This is a display that is a remote control for the woofer level, Pendragon woofer level, 8-inch woofers with a 1,000 watt Class AB Griffin amplifier built into the back of this thing. So it's a self-powered woofer tower, 1,000 watts Class AB. When people come to visit the room, they have quibbles, they like this, they don't like that. It is unbelievable how so many people have said, oh my God, this woofer tower and the sound of this thing and the resolution and the texture and the realism and the low frequencies is equal to the very best I've ever heard. So the woofer tower is completely brilliant. been universally happy with that. Here is the Pendragon ribbon panel. So this is a BG RD75 2-meter ribbon panel, which is almost full range. Even though this is this giant looking complex speaker, it's essentially a two-way. It's a two-way between the woofer tower and the ribbon panel. The crossover is 250 hertz. And this is a set of air motion tweeters, which takes over primarily for phase information at 18 kilohertz. Okay. Just check the notes here so I don't miss any important questions. Okay. I should tell you the space is 24.5 feet long, 20 feet wide. I have this incredibly problematic acoustically soffit at 9 feet, but the rest of the ceiling is 14.5 feet. So those are the room dimensions. Generally 14.5 feet tall, 20 feet wide, 24.5 feet long. I wish it was 30 feet long, make life easier, but can't have everything. Here is the JA100 left channel, and he's been behaving pretty well. This guy has been pretty quiet, no problems, no blowups, always a good thing. Right channel, JA100. The tube boxes here are the empty boxes of special NOS tubes I've put in. So these tubes are now, thanks to my friend Phil Ressler, these are EI from the Yugoslavian factory, EI KT90 Series 3s, Mullard input tube, Telefunken driver tube, and I think Amperex EL86s. Okay, back here we have Saraswati. She is my woo-woo music god that makes the music sound better and gives us good music vibes. She was found in deepest, darkest Indonesia. That's Saraswati, goddess of music. Okay. Over here, you can see the listening position. And come over this way. Here is a pretty serious SPL meter, which I kind of enjoy playing with to see how much I'm killing my hearing. Read R8080 SPL meter. And over here is the iPad dedicated to streaming. I don't use it for anything but streaming, okay? Now, these three things flanking the listening position, 1, 2, 3, these boxes. These things are PSI AVAA active bass absorbers. So these things were reviewed by Stereophile like 15 years ago and then kind of fell off the radar. But what they do is you turn the thing on. It's a very simple device, no fuss, no muss. You turn the thing on and it senses the frequency, the bass frequency of greatest pressure, which in my case is a 45 hertz node from this annoying 9-foot soffit and a 65 hertz mode from just the natural dimensions of the listening room, and it somehow physically counteracts that excessive bass pressure at that frequency. It works completely automatically. And so by experimentation, I have found that, and J.R. Beausclair, a very, very high quality and competent and patient acoustics and a cartridge analysis consultant of Wally Engineering, he determined that they are most effective in this present location. And what they have the effect of doing is they reduce the reverberation time of problematic bass frequencies in your listening room that are causing room modes. Okay, let me repeat. They reduce the reverberation time of the peak bass frequency, which has the subjective effect of making it sound like the room mode isn't there, or at least greatly reduced. Very impressive device. I've been talking about it on What's Best, and I think a bunch of people have them. And they've been a lifesaver because without these things, I would have a room stuffed with acoustic science tube traps probably. And anyway, I have been very, very happy with these things, and I had no idea that my room would be so problematic in terms of a very significant bass bump at 45 hertz and a very significant bass bump at 65 hertz. Is that right, Jeremy? It's not the regular RD75, it's some other version? I was never aware of that. Okay, so I'm coming over here to show you that I'm now on the left side wall of the listening room. Here's the system. listening position, couch. Tinka was very nice to make the place more homey and put in some pillows and throw blankets to be cozy. Okay, so walk in here. We have the adjacent equipment room. The adjacent equipment room is on the right side wall. Here we have the Lampezator Baltic 4, the VTL TL 7.5 Series 3, power supply for that thing. Here we have the crazy I/O, which is this monstrous 3-box phono stage. The I/O control unit. This thing's open because a friend of mine and I last night were playing with some tube rolling for the first time. And this is the I/O control unit. And each channel has its own power supply. Each one of these 3 boxes is about 50 pounds. So Jim White's I/O has always been this unbelievably over-the-top, amazing sounding thing. And I had the 2-box I/O for many, many years in my original system and switched to the 3-box for this. Here we have the Brinkmann Balance turntable. This is a Graham Phantom Elite, which is still in the process of being set up. This is the Reed 5T, another wacky, laser-guided, pivoting, linear tracking toner. Okay. Actually, I should have put this on for you guys so you can see how this thing works. Okay. Pretend we have a record on there. It's working. Okay. Here is how this thing works. So you turn it on back here, and it almost feels like an AI kind of thing because you touch it and then it moves itself. So watch how I touch it, and it moves itself. So what it's doing, it's using its laser-guided mechanism to stay on a pivoting arc. A linear tracking arc, even while it mechanically pivots. Wild, wild thing. I have been absolutely loving it. Okay. Put that back before I break something. Eesh. Okay. Turn that baby off. Okay. Okay. So that's the Reed 5T. This is a Dalby record weight. Some people swear by this thing on What's Best. My friend Kadar twisted my arm to buy it because he said he loves it on the Brinkmann Balance, so that's why I got it. This is the RONT 3, a tube power supply for the motor of the Brinkmann Balance. This is the power supply that powers the bearing heater in the Brinkmann Balance, and this is the battery power supply for the Reed 5T. Over here, we have Studer A820, which was in the hospital for years getting reconditioned and resuscitated and brought back to life in early this year. And I have been having a great time playing tapes. These lights here, my eyes suck. And so I like everything lit up like a goddamn operating table so I can see what the hell I'm doing. So that's why there's so much light here. Okay, so listening room there, equipment room over here. Now we go upstairs to the record tape storage cabinet. Record cleaning machine. Record tape storage cabinet. I spent most of my audiophile life crawling around on the goddamn floor with a mag light, trying in the dark to see the writing on the spines of record jackets. No more. So the point here is that there is a light in the ceiling of every single little cubbyhole. And guess what? No more flashlight, no more crawling around on the floor. I found on Etsy a guy in Turkey who makes these custom engraved record dividers. He'll put whatever you want on them. They're like $4 a piece. I totally recommend them. They're totally worthwhile. And I have my classical section and more classical down here, and then classical switches to jazz. And most of my stuff is very Basic Bitch Rock and Pop, David Bowie, ABC, The Cars, Ava Cassidy, Phil Collins, Jim Croce, The Eagles. Lots of very, very, very basic stuff. Whitney Houston, Fleetwood Mac, Michael Jackson. So the reason I like these tabs is because since my friends make fun of me that I listen to the same stuff over and over, it's true, and I don't care. I love what I love. So very often, it's just much easier to look for the tab than it is to actually look at the spines of the records, because 8 out of 10 times, I'm playing the same stuff over and over. This side of the cabinet is tapes. So once again, divided. This is a little more confusing because the tape size, some of these tape boxes are just incredibly tall. But this is still roughly by classical, and then we go to jazz, and then we go to more of the rock and pop, all reel-to-reel tapes. I literally have more space dedicated to reel-to-reel tapes than I have dedicated to records. I've actually been in the process of selling some records and buying more tapes, and my listening is about 50-50 records and tapes. So that's the picture. Let me go back to the tripod, put this thing down, and answer your questions. Caesar, I'm glad you like the speakers. Jeremy saying the RD75's prosumer version measures the same. Pro, it costs more, is more durable film. Well, that would be great, Jeremy, but how do we know what the hell Griffin put in the Pendragons? What makes you think that they used the better version rather than the original cheaper version? Yes, Caesar, the interconnects are 47 feet between the preamp and the amps. Oh, well, the seat for the lovely Tinka was that couch, which she has her pillows on and a cozy blanket. So that stuff on the couch is for Tinka and Lola. And when Lola comes into the listening room, she is on her best behavior because she knows, all she knows is that special things go on there. So when Lola's here, she doesn't make a peep. Well, Joe, it's a good space. I'm glad it's as big as it is. When is an audiophile ever happy, Joe? I looked into blowing out the rear wall of the room to increase it from 24.5 feet to 30 feet or so, and it was just hideously expensive, and it would have totally screwed up the look of my deck because it would have made the wall of the house basically right up against the pool, would have looked terrible, so I couldn't do it. But I'm happy with the space. Mainly what I like, Joe, is the ceiling. In acoustic measurement calculators, tall ceilings don't factor in well, but I disagree. I have never heard a tall ceiling in a listening room that didn't give the music an opportunity to breathe. So I think tall ceilings are great. Oh, Jeremy, I hope you're right. Who knows? I sure hope you're right. Caesar, it's interesting. I was admonished for a long time on what's best. Oh no, you have to use balanced interconnects at a run of 47 feet. But like a lot of these things, people have their experience, people have their dogmatic philosophies. My view with a lot of this audio stuff is you don't know until you try. And I harbor a theory which is unpopular with real designers, that there might be something in the nature of balanced inputs and balanced circuits that tends to suppress even order harmonic distortion. And so I just wonder if that is why sometimes audiophiles feel that single-ended cables sound a touch more musical. Maybe it's because it has distortion which is not being suppressed by the common mode rejection of the balanced inputs and circuitry. But I don't care. If it's distortion that sounds good to me, bring it on. So I was curious to try single-ended cable at 47 feet. And the card is clear reflection. I hear no more noise. I don't hear any additional noise with the 47-foot single-endeds that I heard with the Belden 1192A balanced. Yeah. So like much of the stuff, I encourage people in this hobby, it's fine to read people's opinions, but don't take anything as dispositive unless you experiment yourself. Just looking back here to see if I missed any questions. What else, folks? Has anybody ever heard the Infinity Reference IRS5 loudspeakers, the 4-column ones? Oh, Colin, thanks so much for joining. Appreciate it. Any questions? You know, Joe, the space may actually look bigger on the iPhone than it really is in real life because of the just the perspective of the lens in the iPhone. Doesn't feel that big, but I'm grateful that you like the size. Ooh, digital interconnects I'm using. Huh. I think I'm using a very, like the least expensive Cardis coax cable from the CD player to the DAC. And yeah, I don't even know. I know, I think it's a basic, very basic Cardis. I got in the basic Belden, I got the basic Iconoclast Belden-based digital interconnect and the least expensive Cardis, and I think I'm using the Cardis. Oh, Caesar, thank you so kindly, sweet of you. You got to come over to listen sometime. You ever come up from Florida to Los Angeles? What is nice about the room is that it's, I walked you guys around, so you see it's kind of like a sort of a wing of the house. So you come through the door and I have the listening room, I have the equipment room, I have the record tape storage room upstairs. I didn't flip the camera around to show you the other side of the record tape storage room because it's my messy desk and computer and stuff like that, so no reason to see that. But I do kind of like the fact that it's the listening room and then the equipment's in a separate room and the records and tapes are in a third room. So it kind of feels like it's kind of like a wing of the house, not just a single room, which I kind of like. Well, this is the first official live stream. The first one was a bit of a practice, I have to say. And I am delighted that you are liking it. Thank you so much for saying. I will be doing these regularly. I am planning to do a question and answer live stream every Sunday, 6 p.m. Los Angeles time, 9 p.m. New York time, 2 a.m. London time, every Sunday at this time. Well, you definitely have to come to Cali. Florida is a beautiful state. California is a beautiful state too. Any other questions? Well, Joe, for guests, you know, I've been doing the Masters and Makers interview series. So do you mean by guests, designers in the industry, which I have been doing those interviews fairly regularly, or do you mean audiophile guests, or who do you mean exactly, Joe? Oh, live. Oh, it's interesting. I think the high-end audio designers prefer the recorded Zoom format because they know that it gives me an opportunity to edit out ums and pauses and ahs. So it's an interesting idea to do those Zoom interviews live streamed, but I haven't done it yet. And I have the feeling I can start asking the interviewees what they prefer. And if they're open to a live Zoom interview, I'm most certainly open to it. But I have the feeling that they take a bit of comfort in knowing that I'm going to edit out oohs and ahs and pauses and things like that. I never, ever, ever, I promise, I never edit to change substantive answers in any way, but just to make it a little bit cleaner and a better flow for the viewer. Sim audio amplifiers, no, I'm sorry. I have not had any experience with sim audio amplifiers. Oh, interesting, Joe. That's interesting. I didn't realize that. Thank you for telling me. Anything else? Any other cable questions? Any questions about the components? Over time, if people have questions, I'm happy to go into more detail, go through the pros and cons and sonic characteristics of any of the individual components, kind of do like a mini review for people on a particular live stream. Happy to do all of that. Please just ask. Just seeing if I missed any other questions while I was walking around on the tour. Oh, I see Caesar's point. The upper range of DS audio are a little on the digital side of sound. Now that's interesting. Why would that be, Caesar? I think that one would think that the upper ends would put into the cartridge all of the best thinking work and technology they can muster, and the upper levels would sound the most natural and musical, and not a touch more digital. So I'm wondering what your answer might there be. Bardot, thank you for the question. These Jadi amplifiers are fixed bias. That's called cathode bias. They call it auto bias, but it's not really auto bias. It's just that the cathode resistor is calibrated to keep the bias of the tube within acceptable range. So there's actually no potentiometer milliamp kind of adjustment that I do myself. They're called auto biasing, but more accurately, it's a fixed cathode bias, I believe is the correct characterization. Why did I switch from transparent to something other than transparent? I believe with cables that it is an incredibly frustrating and difficult morass. I believe that between any two components, there is a particular cable you, I, an individual audiophile would like. But what do? That suggests that in a perfect world with unlimited money, each of us would have a wall of different brands and models of interconnects, so that between every pair of our components, between the phono and the line stage, between the DAC and the line stage, between the line stage and the amps, we could cycle through half a dozen or a dozen different individual interconnects and decide between every single pair of components which sounds best to us. Unfortunately, that's not practical because cables are incredibly expensive, ludicrously expensive in some cases, and we can't have an inventory of cables to cycle through this experiment with. So you have to cut corners and figure things out somehow. If there's a reviewer whose personal preference you've gotten in tune with over time, and you can triangulate on what he or she likes and take a recommendation from that person as a starting point. In my case with the original Transparents, my Martin Logan speakers were always demoed with transparent. My VTL amplifiers were always demoed with transparent. And so I said, kind of stupidly, but summarily, aha, if both my loudspeaker company and my amplifier company like transparent, good enough for me. And that literally is why I bought transparent cables 18 years ago for the system that I had for 18 years. And why not transparent today? Let me show you. Sorry. So this is the set of power duplex outlets. The orange one is the 240 volt outlet. You have the cables all mishmash back here. So through the wall, we have these holes, and on the listening room side of the wall, the wires come out, and then they go underneath this this conduit thing, which I cover with this custom-made board and carpet. And then the cables go into these conduits, which are built into the walnut. And the cables are hidden for about 20 feet, or about 18 feet. And then they emerge from a hole, which you cannot see. They emerge from a hole down there. So very, very simply, transparent network boxes would not have fit through. Transparent network boxes would not have fit through the conduit. And it's really as simple as that. I think transparent is great cables. I think Karen Sumner's terrific. And network boxes simply would not work in the small diameter conduit system I wanted to put in my wall this time. Interesting, EPRFA. I used Kabbalah Emotion for many years and found the transparent reference XL for Wilson LXV and Sim Audio amps a better match. I have only one bit of experience with Kabbalah cables, in much the same way that I think the Nordos has kind of a consensus view that they tend to be a little bit on the clinical bright side, or at least the early ones. I have the impression that Kubala as a house sound typically had a bit of a warmer, slightly less transparent perhaps, sort of a house sound. So it doesn't surprise me really that with a speaker as transparent as the Alex V, you might not really want a little bit of that warmth or perhaps fuzziness. I'm not sure, that's being pejorative, so forgive me if that's not accurate. But I think the Kubala is at a fairly far end of the cable spectrum as far as sonic house characteristics go. Oh, well, I wanted to try to do something other than having wires all over the place just on the floor. Carlos 269, welcome, man. Thanks for joining me here. Carlos is an active member on What's Best, so thank you for joining, Carlos. Why are owners of Uber systems so hesitant to share system videos? Should these highly touted systems shine on videos? Wow, you know I feel there's a lot of loaded questions in there. Let me take the easier one first. I feel that some owners of Uber systems simply don't care what other people think. And they feel that posting a video of their system in the context in which they don't believe that a digital recording on a $2 DAC and an iPhone can provide a reasonable understanding of the in-the-room analog sound of their analog system. I think it's a combination. A, they just don't think videos accurately represent sound in general. And B, it's like wading into quicksand. So I think they just don't want the aggravation. They don't want the bother. Both preamps, Boulder Line Stage and Boulder, match with Transparent XL. Well, so the Boulder electronics, in my view, is a very, very transparent electronics. Very highly resolving, very transparent. I mean, it makes some sense that if I'm right, and again, my personal experience with Boulder, with Kubala is exactly one power cord. But in that one experiment, it definitely had a warmer, slightly fuzzier sound than the competing power cord. So it makes sense that Kubala just might be kind of like oil and water with an incredibly transparent system powered by Boulder. Oh, thank you so much, Raghu, for letting me know you're on What's Best. Sharing is caring. Well, some people just don't like the videos. Sometimes it's because they don't believe that videos can accurately portray the in-the-room sound of their system, which I personally agree with, except in narrow circumstances. And some people feel like they're just, going up in front of the dartboard and bending over and giving people the opportunity to throw darts at their system, and they just don't need to be bothered. So I think that's the answer, Carlos. So it's interesting, EPRFA. So you're agreeing that there is kind of the traditional house sound of Kubala is a touch warmer overall. That's my general understanding, and that was my experience in just one particular power cable comparison. Coming up on an hour. Any other questions, folks? Well, I am intending to do a live stream every Sunday night at 6 p.m. Los Angeles, 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. East Coast time, and 2 a.m. London time. And this has been fun. Next time, I won't do this walk around thing unless anybody asks to see something in particular, in which case I'm happy to do the walk around thing. But next time I'll do it from the desktop computer, so it'll be a little bit easier to read questions and respond rapidly as you ask. So, any other questions finally before we wrap tonight? Alrighty. Well, thank you very, very much for joining me on this inaugural What's Best Forum live stream. I'm very grateful for your participation, and I hope to see you next Sunday. Take care, everybody. Have a good week.